On a late November night in 2012, while driving in the foothills of Washington, two brothers were surrounded by mysterious creatures. Still haunted and forever changed, these men took to the internet, creating a forum for others. If you've had an encounter, and no one else can help, maybe you can contact Sasquatch.
It looked like somebody was bent over and had their head in the window of the deer blind, and it either heard me or smelt me, and he pulled his head out of the tent and stood straight up, and that shocked me. They don't make people that big.
The way it moved, almost as if it was gliding across the beach. I've never seen anything move like that in my life. They were screaming at each other in gibberish. It sounded like a language, and they were chuntering away back and forwards, back and forwards, back and forwards. I know what a bear looks like, and there is no way on this planet that what I saw were bears.
911, what are you reporting?
Jesus Christ, you better...
Sir?
Deal!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
That son of a bitch is about 6'9", I don't know.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh.
Hey, this is Jackie from Ventura, California, and you're listening to my favorite podcast in the whole world, Sasquatch Chronicles.
Welcome to the show. Tonight we'll be speaking with Scott, who had a strange encounter back in 1991 when he was just 11 years old. He was in the Boy Scouts. While in the woods, he came face to face with a small hairy figure that his young mind could only describe as looking like an Ewok from Star Wars. We will also hear from Bryce, who's from Ohio. He had an experience 21 years ago when he was just 17 years old. Bryce and his friend were spending the weekend at a family friend's cabin deep in the wilderness of Vanceburg, Kentucky. The two decided to take a paddle boat out on the property's 5-acre pond, but as they neared the shore, Bryce spotted something massive, a figure with broad shoulders. And finally, Jimmy from Georgia has recently had strange activity on his property. Everything from weird footprints showing up in his backwoods, rocks being thrown at him, his son being roared at, and Jimmy also describes a visual of something large with a pair of glowing red eyes on the edge of the power line near his hunting area. And I'll include some of the photos he sent me. As I was telling the members last night, bear with me, I'm fighting off a bit of a sinus cold, but I'm pushing through. If you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com, and if you get a chance to check out sasquatchchronicles.com, you can become a member and get additional shows. Let's jump into it. I want to welcome Scott to the show. Scott, thanks for coming on.
Very welcome. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, and you had this strange encounter back in 1991. You were about 11 years old. If you would, just kind of start from the very beginning. What were you doing and what happened?
Sure. I was in the Boy Scouts. I was 11 years old. It was about this time of year, actually. The first week of October, they do a Civil War reenactment in Perryville, Kentucky, from the Battle of Perryville. So I was there with my scout troop, and we were there to see the reenactment. There's lots of farmland around there with patches of forest. And we were camped at one of the farmers' fields who, I guess, allowed scout troops to set up. I don't really remember the name or exactly where the farm was. And I was one of the new scouts, so I don't know if you've ever heard of snipe hunting. It's a prank that the older scouts play on the new scouts.
I haven't heard of that, no.
Yeah, so they convince you that you're going snipe hunting. A snipe is a ground bird that runs along, and they tell you to carry a pillowcase and kind of walk along with your pillowcase close to the ground and clap your hands and say, here's snipe, here's snipe. And it's just a silly game to try to tease the new scouts, I guess. And you always do it just before dark. So we were out walking in this huge, couple 100-acre farm field that bordered a line of trees for probably a quarter of a mile. I say trees, but it was like a small patch of woods, you know. And it was probably 7:30, 8 o'clock at night, because this time of year it's just before it gets dark. And we're walking along. There were about 10 or 12 of us. And I'm kind of in the back doing my little thing with my pillowcase saying, here's snipe, here's snipe. So they start getting a little farther ahead. And I've been down to tie my shoe. And when I do, we're walking maybe 25 feet from the wood line, the tree line. And I've been down to tie my shoe. And when I do, I hear this rustling in the trees. And I swing and shine my flashlight at the trees. And what I see was an Ewok. At least that's what my 11-year-old mind thought that I was seeing, was an Ewok, like from Star Wars. It was like the same height as me, covered in hair. I remember when my flashlight hit its eyes, it had its big wide open eyes, but flashlight hit it like squinted. And it stood there, and we stood there looking at each other for, 3-4 seconds. And it was standing right next to a big tree. And it looked up to the right, like it was looking at something. And when it did, something jerked it out of sight. So I think that it was standing next to its mother, and it looked up and she realized that it was being seen, and she jerked it out of sight. And when that happened, I started yelling for my friends, and they all stopped, looked back at me, and I took off running and told them the story, and they all laughed, and we went about our night. And it's really interesting to me because it was like the same size as me, so in my head, that could still be out there, same age as me. Same size, or well, I'm assuming much bigger by now. But yeah, so that was my sighting.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you ran into a smaller one. It's more rare. It does happen. I've had eyewitnesses on that have seen the little ones. Obviously from eyewitness reports, people mainly see the large ones. We all know what an Ewok looks like, but would you kind of describe what you were looking at?
Sure. 4.5 feet tall, kind of skinny, but heavier than I was at 11 years old, covered in very, very dark hair. Wasn't black, but I'd say very dark brown hair. It had more hair on its face than expected. Its face was flat, and it actually had, the nose seemed rather small and kind of tight lips. I only saw its right arm was behind the tree, so I only saw its left arm and left leg, but probably, 80% of its body at least. I don't remember making out any muscles or anything like that, but I would assume at a young age, they probably aren't very developed yet. That's what I remember.
Was there anything about the face that reminded you of a human?
The general shape of the face reminded me of a human, except it didn't have a neck. It just went from head right on to shoulders. And I just remember, I just really thought that I thought that it was an Ewok. I can, as I'm telling you this, I can picture like the Ewok in Star Wars, like that it looked like. So it's really funny and comical to me. But big dark eyes, kind of had the bridge of its nose seemed very short, like it didn't have a very long bridge. It was mainly just like the nose was there without like a protrusion of a bridge of a nose, and then just tight lips, a big forehead.
You're there face to face with this thing. I can imagine the shock that you're in, but you never noticed the bigger one. You just saw it kind of be snatched away.
Right. I never saw the big one. I just, something obviously jerked it out of the way. So to me, it's just what I assumed that, it was a family member of it or something.
You know, it's interesting. Over the years, I've interviewed many Boy Scouts, former Boy Scouts, and they seem to have a run-in with these creatures. I almost wonder sometimes if the creature's like curious, you know, a bunch of kids making noise. And like I said, you always hear Boy Scouts encountering these things.
Probably so, because that area, not much goes on there other than that 1 week of the year when they do the Civil War reenactment. So it creates a lot of commotion. There's a ton of people in town. And so it's like a 3-day thing. And I'm pretty sure that was on Saturday night when that happened. So there'd already been like a full day of Civil War reenactment going on, lots of noise and, you know, fake gunfire going on. So I'm sure it stirred up all the wildlife around there probably was stirred up running around.
You know, over the years, when I've interviewed people who have seen the younger ones, I've heard descriptions from, you know, somewhere between a little kid and a chimp. And I've also heard Ewok. I've heard Ewok a few times. I know this was your main sighting. What do you think Sasquatch is, kind of looking back at this moment?
I think it is a blood and guts creature, but I think there's a lot in this world that we don't understand. We may think that we know everything, but we don't. So there may be some abilities that Sasquatch has that we don't understand, you know, like I don't really say cloaking, but maybe what's it called? The infrasound that can maybe make it where they go. I've heard people say blurry or fuzzy or things like that, but maybe it just makes something happen to where our brains can't process and we kind of lose sight of them, which would explain why so many stories, like they're there 1 second, then they're gone, you know?
Would you put Sasquatch in the category of a non-human primate as opposed to something closer to us, like a man?
I kind of think it may be a mixture, you know, of a primate Neanderthal type mixture, but it has to be very intelligent and very smart, obviously, to evade detection all these years. But as many people that have had encounters, there has to be something. Everybody can't be wrong, you know?
You know, one of the things that I've often thought about over the years is, you know, you come across any other animal on the planet, a black bear, a cougar, and if they have their young, you're dead. You know, even an elk can kill you just as quick as a black bear can. Even prey will protect their young. And what's weird to me in a lot of these encounters, when people come across a young one, usually mama is not too far away and you think you'd be dead. But in most encounters, that's not how it goes down. I mean, even in this encounter, it didn't really react to your presence more than just snatching its young away.
Right. It was just, I'm sure it was just as curious as I was. And, you know, we have a lot of black bears in Kentucky. I'm an avid backpacker. I've been in the wilderness most of my life and I've never seen a black bear, but we have a lot of them, you know, so I like to think about things like that when people are always like, well, why haven't we found one? Why haven't we done this or that? But there's lots of animals out there that are here that we don't see. Do you know Charlie Raymond, the Bigfoot BFRO in the Kentucky branch here?
Yeah, I know of Charlie.
Yeah, so he took this. I gave him this encounter a couple years ago. It's when I first came out with it and told him about it. And he, a few weeks later, contacted me saying that there'd been a number of other sightings throughout the years in that general area, which is interesting to me because it makes me wonder if that's the same one that I saw that's still being encountered, you know?
Yeah, it does make you wonder. I know when I talk with Bob Gimlin, I mean, we rarely talk about Bigfoot anymore, but I remember him telling me that he often wondered about Patty and if she's still alive. And because, you know, Bob was scared. You know, he's cool as a cucumber now, but Bob told me he was scared. And, you know, if Patty did anything that he didn't much care for, he was going to shoot it. But having said that, Bob told me he's glad he didn't. And he often, you know, she's on his mind these many years later. So I completely get how you feel, you know, wondering where this little one is at. About 21 years later, you had another incident. Tell me about that.
2012, December of 2012, me and two friends were backpacking at the Red River Gorge geological area in eastern Kentucky. That's actually where Charlie Raymond lives now. We're just outside of that park. It's not a super big park. I think it's about 15,000 acres, but it connects to a really large portion of Daniel Boone National Forest on one side and Natural Bridge State Park on the other side. So it has a very large range altogether. But I do a lot of winter camping, winter backpacking, just to get away from the mosquitoes and the ticks and all the people. And we were camped back this trail called Buckskinner Ridge Trail. And it was only about 3/4 of a mile long. It was on like a ridge line, like a peninsula. And what was interesting about it is at the very end of this ridge line, I say very end, but maybe 100 yards from the end of it, there was a small pond, like a big depression in the rock or in the land that held water. So I thought that it would be a cool place to camp, maybe we would see wildlife coming in to get water. And it was fully wooded all the way out to the end. And it got really narrow, about 100 yards past where we were camped. And it was about a 30-foot drop off all the way around, like a cliff line. So me and two of my friends were standing around the campfire. It was probably 12:30 at night. We'd been having fun, drinking, just shooting the crap with each other. And all of a sudden we heard, like, it sounded like a man walking through the trees behind us, like big bipedal steps. And we all turn around and shine our light at it, and it stops. The sound stops, and we don't see anything. And we're all like, what was that? And we turn back around after a few seconds, and as soon as we turn around looking at the fire, 3 more big steps. And we all look at each other again, and we're like, you've got to be kidding me. We're all of us are thinking, what is this? It's on 2 feet. It's winter time. We hadn't seen another person the entire day. And we're 3/4 of a mile from the nearest road. And it's winter time, and there's something making steps with no light on. And this happened 4 times. Looking away, it did it. Looking away, it did it again. So I didn't have a very good sense of self-preservation back then. And I said to my buddies, let's get it. And like, what do you mean? I was like, let's just chase it and see what it is. And they all agreed to it. So I tell them I'm going to charge right at it, and I want you all to flank it. We do 1, 2, 3, and we just charge, busting into the woods, screaming, ah, running into the woods. And it starts running away much faster than we are, on 2 feet. And it gets to that edge of that cliff line, and it jumps. And it lands down you hear it land down below in the leaves or limbs, and just continue running down through the holler, down the valley. We never saw anything, but that's what we heard and what we chased, and it ran. And to me, it's like, what else could have it been?
I will say, out of all the behavior, this is probably the number one thing that eyewitnesses report. I know this situation is a little bit different, but like when people are walking in the woods, it will match them step for step. And when they stop, it stops. And I've often wondered, what would happen if you just charged it? And I guess in your situation, you found the answer. I mean, it doesn't sound like a man to me, especially where you guys are at, middle of nowhere, it's snowing. And this behavior kind of makes you feel like these creatures are screwing with you. Did you get the feeling like it didn't know you guys were onto it?
I'm not real sure. I think a lot of times, the campfire, maybe they're curious about the fire. Maybe they're curious about the voices. Maybe it was there to try to get the water I had mentioned. Maybe it was just everything coming together at once. I don't know if it came down the trail behind us or if it was already out there past our camp and it was trying to walk around and get out without us knowing it. There's a lot of unknowns there.
When it was all said and done, what was the conversation like? I mean, what did everyone kind of think it was?
Me and one of my friends, Shannon, me and him both thought it was Bigfoot. And then our other friend, he's not a believer at all. He was like, he telling us we're crazy. He's like, oh, it was a deer. We're like, that was not a deer. You know what a deer sounds like. And that sounded like a big man, and that guy, he just started started shaking his head and had this nervous look on his face. And he said like 3 or 4 times, he's like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. Like, it's like he knew, but he didn't want to admit what it was,
Yeah, nothing of that sounds like deer behavior to me. Did you guys take a look the next day to see if you could find anything, any sort of evidence?
We did. We went and searched that whole area looking for, footprints or anything like that. But it was just heavy leaf cover and limbs and brush, and you couldn't see anything. There's a lot of game trails and stuff like that through there. And we couldn't tell exactly which way it went. It was just tearing through the woods, getting away from us. My older brother, he also does a lot of backpacking. He does a lot of solo trips. I've never gotten into the solo stuff, but he was there on a trail about a mile from there. I think it was like 2 years after this had happened to us, and he was laying in his hammock camping, and he got awoken by, he said it felt like somebody put their hand on his shoulder and pushed him, like swung him. And by the time, he said he sat up real quick, turned his light on, looked around, and there was nothing there. I always thought that was a pretty eerie thing to happen. Wonder what that could have been.
Yeah, that is very creepy, especially being in a hammock and not being quite awake enough to see what pushed you. You were pretty young when you saw this thing that you kind of describe as an Ewok. If you had the chance, would you ever want to see one again?
Absolutely. I want to see a big one. I've seen the Littlefoot. I want to see the Bigfoot. I want to see its dad, or its mother. The dads I hear can be a little aggressive and intimidating. But I still get down to that area about every 6 weeks. So I'm hoping that, again, someday I'll come across something, but it's become very, very popular down there, especially since after COVID. So the more people that are around, I'm sure the less likely you are to encounter something. They probably moved on to less populated areas.
I think if an area is populated all the time, they'll avoid it. But, in this situation, you got the Boy Scouts, you got a bunch of little kids running around. Then you have the Civil War stuff going on, all the fake gunfire. And they probably came in, it's something they don't often hear. Probably came in to check it out. That curiosity kicking in. In your email, you'd mentioned this strange paranormal encounter. If you would, tell me about it.
Yeah, so I went to Eastern Kentucky University, which is actually only about 45 minutes from Red River Gorge, where I had just talked about. And I lived this was in 2000 or 2001 when this happened. I lived on the 3rd floor of Keene Hall, which is a 16-story dorm. I was friends with everybody up and down the hallway, so we used to all leave our doors open and we'd just walk up and down and socialize. And one night I was sitting at the computer, had the lights on in the room, and had the door open, and I'm sitting facing the computer, and to my right is the big window that looks out over the stadium and a busy street out in front of the dorm. So lots of commotion out there. So I'm sitting there doing work on the computer, and I get this really overwhelming cold feeling. And I look to the right, and that window is completely black, not a speck of light coming through. And I lean towards the window what is going on? And when I do, the black goes straight up in the air and all the lights shine back again. And I got freaked out. I jumped up. It was very cold in the room. And I ran out of the room and ran down the hall where all my buddies were. And I told them what happened. So, they're all laughing, cackling, carry on. Well, about 15 minutes later, we all go walking back down to my room. And I sit back down in the chair again. And all my buddies stand in front of the window and pose. I told them, I said, I think this was a ghost. So they're all laughing. So they all stand in front of the window and they're acting like they have their arm around this ghost, taking a picture of it, with it. And when we got the picture developed right next to me, so they were I'm sitting at the computer, they were behind me because it was about a 6 foot wide window. They're behind me posing in front of the window, but right next to my face where I was sitting is very clear outline of a man. It almost looks like the fisherman outfit. It's like he had on a raincoat. It was a raincoat and a big brim hat, and his eyes were glowing, and he's holding a key, like a skeleton key. He wasn't illuminated. It was just a black outline of this, and all you could see was his eyes and the key, and then the outline of his silhouette.
That's really weird. And that was outside your dorm room?
Right outside the dorm room window, yeah. And 3rd floor,
Do you still have that picture? I would love to see it.
Yeah, I can. I've got it in a storage box, but I know where it is. I'll scan it and email it to you.
Yeah, I would love to see that picture. I'll post it underneath this episode. Was that the only thing that happened in that dorm room?
Yeah, that was it. I told one of my friends, this girl, I told her the story, and she said that, I don't know, I didn't verify to see if this was true or not, but she said 2 floors above me, I was room 308. She said room 508, 2 years to the day before that, a guy had committed suicide out of the window, jumped out the window. So that was the only thing that I thought was kind of an unusual coincidence, you know. It was it was freaky though. I mean, every time I come across that picture, I'll take a picture of it and send it to some of my buddies, and they're all like, there it is, there's the picture, you know. And you know, there's a lot of times in life where I always tell people, do you ever think you see something out of the corner of your eye and you turn and look and there's nothing there? I'm like, well, maybe there is something there, and it's just we're catching something we're not supposed to see, you know, even for a brief second. And by the time we glance that way, our brain has realized, you know, or told us what's been pre-programmed to understand or not understand.
Yeah, I had a deliverance minister on one time, and that's basically what he said. You know, you'll see these things out of your peripheral, kind of out of the corner of your eye. And it kind of goes back to, I know Halloween was just the end of last month, and you always hear about the black cats, you know, for Halloween. But the black cats, it really has nothing to do with cats. It has to do with demons and evil spirits and kind of seeing them out of, you know, one's corner of their eye. I know it goes back to European superstition, witchcraft and that sort of thing. But I've had witnesses on that said, you know, out of the corner of my eye, I thought it was a black cat going behind the couch. It's weird. It makes you wonder why we see it in the peripheral, but not straight on.
Yeah. You know, it comes back with things like babies and dogs, how they'll stare at a wall and bark, or babies that'll giggle and laugh looking at something that's not there. You know, I think it's all kind of, that's the baby portion is the reason I think of spirits or ghosts, because I don't think a baby would laugh if it's some demon looking thing. But then again, we don't know what is a demon? What does it look like, you know?
Yeah, it makes you wonder for sure. And I really appreciate you sharing that and the other two incidences that happened to you. I really enjoyed chatting with you. Thank you so much, Scott.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always fun to tell a story to somebody that actually appreciates it.
Next up on the show, I want to welcome Bryce. Bryce, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, nice to meet you, Wes. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, it's nice to meet you as well. And your encounter took place about 21 years ago. You were 17. And I know the encounter happened in Kentucky. If you would just kind of start from the very beginning. What were you doing and what happened?
Yeah, so this took place in the summer of 2005. It was probably June or July because I had just graduated high school. And a family friend of ours, he had built a cabin in the middle of the woods. It was about 10 or 15 miles away from the town of Vanceburg, Kentucky. And I say Vanceburg, there's one stoplight in this town, and 10 or 15 miles away from that is really secluded. So to kind of set the scene a little bit. And so it was a Friday night, and I wanted to take my best friend down to this cabin because he had never been. So we head out, and we get there probably 10 or 11 at night. And this cabin is just, it's beautiful. It's kind of set in the bottom of a valley. And there's a big 5-acre pond and fully stocked with fish. And we eventually get there, and everybody's kind of winding down for the night. And us being teenagers, we have only been there for probably 30, 45 minutes at this point. So we're bored looking for something to do as everybody else is winding down. And it's a beautiful night. I remember that. It was just perfect. We see the paddle boat on the pond, so we decide to take a little cruise, no flashlights, no nothing. So we're just kind of cruising around. On this pond, there's a cove towards the back part of it, and it blocks out all the light from the cabin, the campfire, and it's completely pitch black out there. So, of course, we head towards that area. We wanted to stay away from the bank because we didn't want to run into snakes or anything, so we're kind of creeping around and creeping up to what we thought would be the bank area. As we're kind of looking towards the shoreline, start to notice something that I don't know if it was closer or it was just darker than the rest of the background in the trees. And as I'm telling you this is all like just what's going on in my head within like a second or two. So I'm kind of focusing in on whatever this thing was. And as we're kind of creeping closer to this bank, I start to notice your brain starts to recognize patterns, I guess. And I start to notice what looked to me like was a shoulder, and a very big shoulder. And then you kind of recognize a shoulder, and then you follow that up and there's a head with no neck, just a head. And then you kind of follow that around and there's another shoulder. It was, to me, the shoulders were as wide as a small car hood, and something that was 7-8 feet tall at least. I mean, we were kind of sitting down on a paddle boat, but it was at least that big. And it was almost simultaneously as I was recognizing what I was seeing. And I don't know if I mentioned, we were probably 15, 20, 30 feet away from this thing. I saw, and there was kind of moonlight shining through the top of the trees. That's the only way I even saw it. There was a little bit of moonlight. I saw what looked to me like it raised its right leg up, like it was facing us. We were in the water. Raised its right knee up to about where its hip line would be, about to his waist. And then immediately, the biggest splash that just scared the daylights out of us. This all happened just so fast. Like we just kind of approached something that wasn't expecting us to be there, I guess. I don't know. But I'll never forget the look on my friend's face. It was almost like a movie. We turned towards each other and we had nothing to say. And what felt like probably 5 seconds was probably a half a second that we turned around in the paddle boat, and we're on a 5-acre pond. So this is not a small distance in a paddle boat to get back. We start booking it back, and that was the most terrifying ride back to shore I've ever had, because that entire time we're thinking whatever we just saw is right on us. We never looked back. We booked it back to where the cabin was, and we see my dad standing on the dock, and he's kind of laughing and joking because he thought we had thrown something in the water. But we were hysterical, telling him what we saw, and he realized we didn't take anything with us. He saw the fear in my eyes, and he knew me well enough to know I wasn't joking about this. So that's kind of my story.
Yeah, the splash that you guys heard, I mean, was it stomping its foot, or do you think it threw a rock?
We've talked about this. I don't know if it like stepped and threw something, or if it was just its foot stomping the water and it made that loud of a splash. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of hard to tell. I know it's late at night and you're seeing this huge bulking figure almost kind of make a step towards you guys, or whatever it was doing with its leg. Did you ever talk to your family friend that owned the cabin about what happened, or is there anything else happening there?
I never did. It's kind of a thing. You mention this story to people and they kind of laugh it off. I even told the people at the cabin at the time, and they kind of joked about it over the weekend. So I guess it's just something you kind of keep to yourself, because nobody's really going to take you that serious.
Yeah, I hear you. I completely get where you're coming from. Did you ever go back?
Never went back. That was my last time.
At the time, 21 years ago, did you know what it was?
Bigfoot wasn't on my mind at that time in my life. It wasn't. It just wasn't. I don't know. Whatever it was, instantly scared. When I started to see it, it scared me instantly, because it was something bipedal, standing up, bigger than any man I've ever seen. And I don't know really what I thought it was. But now looking back, hearing all your stories, and I don't know what else it would be but that,
Yeah, and I know it was kind of a brief encounter, but you got to look at this saying kind of a scary encounter, especially when you're in in a little pedal boat trying to get away. 21 years later, what do you think Sasquatch is?
My experience, it seems flesh and blood, but I've heard too many different things that there's got to be some kind of mystical aspect or something, not flesh and blood. To me, that's my opinion.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of weird stuff with this topic that even for myself, I kind of step back and I'm like, I don't know. Do you think the creature actually gave chase that night? I guess it's kind of hard to tell. I mean, that's a pretty big pond you guys were on.
It's a giant pond, but you're not sticking around to find out if he's chasing you, you know? I mean, like I said, I don't know if this thing was standing in the water before. He could have been standing in the water the whole time trying to fish, because this was a very well-stocked pond. And now that I think of it, it was probably the only water source for many miles. And this cabin was vacant most of the year. So I don't know if this was just something he was used to doing and not knowing there would be two teenagers at that late at night going back there to do whatever. Who knows?
Do you still talk with your friend who was with you that night?
I haven't in many years, but we talked about it for a long time. He believes it too. I mean, he knows what we saw. I will never forget that.
I can definitely understand the way you feel. And thank you so much for taking the time to come on.
Appreciate you letting me tell my story, though, I do.
Next up on the show, I want to welcome Jimmy. Jimmy, thanks for coming on.
Yes, sir, Wes. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, I appreciate you being here. And I know this is happening on your property down there in Georgia. And you sent me a bunch of pictures. I'll post them underneath this episode. If you would you start from the beginning? When did this start? And walk me into some of the different things that are happening.
Okay, this basically started probably back in 21. Somebody told me I was an avid deer hunter. Somebody told me to take peanut butter, take the caps and screw it to the tree. And I put out about 4 or 5 of them. This is right behind where I live. And I kind of noticed it looked like something had been digging in the peanut butter, like fingers running through it, but it never crossed my mind that something was like that around here. So fast forward to the next year, I was doing a food plot back there, and I was having a big issue with armadillos digging up my food plot. So I was going back there early, checking it out one morning, and right by one of my trees, I found the big footprint by my tree. One of my trees, they had stepped into an armadillo dig, probably about 15 inches. And I actually stuck my foot next to it to kind of gauge how big it was. And it was probably 1.5 inches deep in the ground. And I actually tried to stomp my foot around to see if I could make the same impression, and I couldn't. And then the next track was actually going off my pond dam down into the bottom, and I kind of got curious. So I kind of eased around to the back of my food plot in the woods, and I found 2 small oak trees about 18 foot tall, and they were probably snapped off at 12 feet high. And that's when one of the guys I was working with turned me on to your podcast. That's when I started listening to it, doing a lot of digging into it. I hadn't had anything really since then, but last year I was hunting on a wood line between 2 fields, and I had something whistling at me. It sounded a lot like a man. I mean, it was a high-pitched whistle, and it was short. And it was in between me and the actual creek back there, so I didn't figure anybody been back there, but maybe it could have been a man, but never seen nothing. And that kind of got my curiosity piqued. Then I was actually coming out at night down the power line, and the woods went silent, dead silent, and that kind of spooked me a little bit. Rewind back to when I first got that footprint back there, I was mentioning it to my son, and he said, yeah, he lives with my mother-in-law next door, and he said I was in the backyard at night, and I actually got roared at, and then it kind of petered off into a growl, and he said he could actually feel it. This was right behind my house. Now, I live probably a quarter of a mile from where I hunt. I mean, it's right next to me. By the time it'll take 5 minutes to get back there, where I got whistled at.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of activity. I'm looking at your pictures here. And again, I'll post this underneath the episode on Sasquatch Chronicles. That's a pretty good print. Usually prints don't come out that good on photos. This is a really good print. Have you seen the creature?
The only time I've seen them was red eye shine, and that was the other night after the first rock throw incident. They hit the blind. And you see, I was sitting there one evening, it was probably about 6, starting to just get a little bit dark, and I heard a sound off in the woods, and then all of a sudden it come in and hit the side of the blind, probably about right below where my knee is. Basically, I about jumped out of the chair. I mean, that's how loud it was. The red eyes was actually, it was the next night. I called my brother because I was actually kind of a little scared to go back in there, and I wanted to wait for all the hunters. I got 2 other guys hunting here with me, and I wanted to wait for them to actually leave, and I didn't want to mess up their hunting. So I said, go back here with me. I want to show you something, there was a lot of activity back here. They had something thrown at me. I just wanted to go back there and check the trail camera. And so we went by there. We didn't see nothing. We were walking out, and my brother heard something walking beside us. We couldn't ever see it. He shined his light over there, but we didn't see it. But once we got out to the power line where my truck was parked, my brother walked back to my truck. I started scanning the side of the power line with my light. And that's when I seen the 2 red eyes. They were standing probably about, I'd say 4 or 5 foot tall. And as soon as I hit it with a light, it ducked behind the tree. I kind of had a figuring it might have been one of them. Just kind of the way it acted. Whenever I hit it, as soon as I hit it with the light, it kind of ducked in. It kind of turned its head and kind of disappeared behind the tree. And I actually started walking towards it with my light, keeping my light on it, and I never seen anything else. I didn't see it come out from behind the tree. I didn't see it take off. It just disappeared. As soon as the eyes disappeared, I seen it turn and duck behind a tree. I just knew I was going to see something coming out the other side. And so I kept my light on and started moving closer towards it. And I never seen anything come out, just like it vanished.
The rocks that were being thrown at you when you were in your deer stand, what size of rock was it? Was it a pretty big rock?
It was more like pebbles.
And this incident with the red eyes, how long ago did that happen?
That was last week.
Did you and your brother talk about it?
He didn't ever see it. He went back to the truck, and actually, I guess the door was open to the truck, and he was looking at his phone while I was doing that, so he didn't ever see the eye shine. But it was kind of how it turned. I mean, it's like it just made one little smooth little turn and just kind of ducked behind the tree.
Yeah, it's really weird. You're seeing an outline and these red eyes ducked behind a tree. You run over there and there's nothing there. Very strange. What else is going on there?
Well, I got that footprint back there, and I was actually trying to document it, so I was taking peanut butter jars back there and leaving peanut butter jars with the lid on. And the first time I done it, I had a lid taken off, and the peanut butter jar disappeared. And then I thought I probably had about 3 or 4 disappeared. Then I had one that actually left that had that tongue print in it. It looked like something had licked it out. And that's where I caught that little track. It was about an 8-inch track.
Oh, so there's more than one, which generally is. But I'm looking at this 15-inch track, and you captured an 8-inch track. You'd mentioned your son being roared at, and you were hearing the whistling. On this property, are you hearing any other weird vocalizations?
Mostly just owls. I did hear one that before that rock hit. It sounded like an owl messed up. It was just like a short hoot, and then it just stopped. My brother actually thought of the idea of taking a tater rake back there. And so I actually went back there one evening before I went to go hunt, and I took a tater rake to clean the ground around where I've been feeding the deer just to see if I could get a track where the peanut butter jar was sitting. Well, I actually laid the tater rake against an oak tree while I was hunting, and I picked it up and took it with me when I left, stuck it in the back of the truck. The next morning when I got up, my tater rake went in the back of the truck. And me thinking maybe I left it, I went back the next day, looked around, come back to the house and couldn't find it. Asked my son to go out there and see if he could find it. Nobody could find it. That night, I had worked late, and I got home about 11:15, and my tater rake was sitting right by the dog pen by the house.
That's kind of weird. And you called it a tater rake?
Yeah, tater rake. It's kind of like a yard rake, but it's got the hard rakes on the bottom. I guess you would call that the hard tines.
Yeah, I've never heard that before. I mean, I know what you're talking about. I use it for like raking leaves and stuff. I'm going to start calling it my tater rake. That's awesome. You know, a lot of times when people have these creatures on their property, they'll often report things going missing and then showing back up in places that they've already looked. And this tater rake disappeared out of the back of your truck, almost like it took it and brought it back.
Yeah, because I mean, we all looked around for it. And then that night that it had got returned, my sister was over with her little girls, and they come running back from my mother-in-law's house saying they heard something in the woods breaking twigs. So I told her it was probably it bringing it back. It was just kind of real shocking that something like that would happen.
It's creepy when that happens. I know the Browns property here in Washington, they often reported stuff like that where items would just go missing and then magically show back up. And you sent me a picture of your chicken coop. What's going on with the chicken coop?
My chicken coop's probably 20 yards from our back door. It's not very far. Now it's under a security light. And I noticed, actually it was my wife noticed it while I was hunting. She sent me a picture of the hole. And there was a little hole on the back side of the chicken coop, like something had stretched the wire, but it was at a 4-foot level. Well, I figured, you know, I've heard raccoons can go in there and they can actually go around the bottom and stretch the chicken wire or break it. But where it was at, it was just kind of strange that something would have ripped a hole right there. But my wife about 4 weeks ago found one of our chickens in the shed. It was mostly eating nothing but bones. And then she actually brought that to my attention. She said it was kind of strange that it was actually tossed in the shed, which is probably 30 feet from my chicken coop. And it's not real easy to get in there. I mean, the door's open, but it was like it was tossed into the back of the shed, which threw me off because, you know, if a chicken went in there and died, you would have smelled it. But we never smelled the dead chicken. I mean, because there's literally right behind my house where this happened. I mean, it's right where the chickens actually roost too. There's like a roost board right there where they broke the hole through.
Yeah, you know, I've never had chickens before, so I don't really know what to look for when it comes to like a coyote or, I mean, I would imagine what I would look for, but this just kind of looks like it was just spread apart enough to get an arm in there and take a chicken, and 4 feet up. That's pretty high for most predators of chickens. Before all this happened, what was kind of your take on Bigfoot?
Well, I was pretty sure they existed. They're real, but thinking they're real and knowing they're real is like two different things. I mean, with this experience I've been having, it's took it to a whole nother level.
Yeah, that's very true, Jimmy. You sent me this picture. I'm looking at this one, and again, I'll post it underneath this episode. It looks like a ball of light. And I know you described it as an orb. Was this the only time you've seen the lights on the property?
Yeah, that's the only time. Well, we were in a field one time. It was late at night. I guess we were called stargazing or whatnot. It was a couple of years ago. And we had a ball light actually lit up by us. And that was probably the first time I seen that. But this was just somebody had texted me from work, and they wanted to know if I was at my store. And I, instead of responding to them, I just sent a picture. I snapshot the picture, you know, where I was sitting in the stand. And I seen it after I took the picture. I didn't never visually see it, but it came through on the picture, which was kind of strange.
Yeah, that is strange. Have you ever thought about putting up lights around the home? Almost like a football stadium to kind of get them to back off. I mean, your chicken coop's pretty close to your home. I mean, they're basically coming up to the home now. Have you ever thought about just lighting the place up?
Yeah, I've actually thought about that. What kind of throws me off is the trail camera. I can never get a picture of it. I've actually had peanut butter jars within 15 feet of the front of the trail camera, and I've had them take it and nothing come up, not even triggering the motion sensor off the camera. So that's kind of strange.
Yeah, welcome to the club. It seems very tough to get them on game cam, and eyewitnesses will report stuff just vanishing, where you would think the camera would trip and take a picture, but it doesn't. There is a guy I know here in Washington State, and I've had him on the show before. He has gotten pictures of them, but it's always from a distance. The game camera trips, but it's always from a distance, like when they're moving from one tree to the next. But he's put out food, and he said the food will vanish and nothing is ever captured.
Yeah, it literally took the cap off the peanut butter, ate half the peanut butter, and there was no motion ever detected. It goes from where I'm leaving, coming back, and it's happened, and the only thing I have on camera are deer. But it'll usually happen before the deer come. You'll see it laying down there, you'll see the cap, or the jar will actually just be vanished. I mean, it's not there no more. I just don't know. I can't figure it out. I've asked several people to talk to them. Just nobody can actually give me an answer for it. That why the camera will not pick up motion whenever it happens. I said it's right directly in front of my camera when it happens, but there's no detection. And it seems almost like it has a supernatural aspect to it or something they can do. I don't know. I'm kind of stumped. I can't figure it out. I mean, how they're able to do that. I know I've put honey buns out for them too, and they've actually eaten the honey buns, and I can never. The same thing happens when the honey buns or something comes in there and actually rips the package open, takes the honey bun, and there's no activity on the camera. That's been happening too.
Yeah, I wish I could say it wasn't common, but it's actually very common. And I wish I had a great answer for you. I don't. I'm with you. I don't know why the game cameras won't capture them when they're right there grabbing the food. It's what you're reporting has been reported many, many, many times. Do you guys still hunt this property?
Yeah, I still go out there and hunt, but I'm actually moved my blind out of that bottom because after that second incident of having something thrown at me, that really unnerved me. So it's not a very comfortable place to sit. And I've also been in there and had trees snap when I walk in there. You can hear the trees break. I actually went back there to where I heard the noise when I walked in the other morning. It's like 2 mornings I've been in there and I've heard actual trees snap. You hear a loud pop. There's no wind blowing. You don't ever hear the tree fall. But when I went back to retrieve my blind earlier, I actually went around back in there when I heard the sound and actually found like 3 or 4 trees that had been snapped over. They weren't very big, probably about 2 inches around, but it was in a group of trees where they were all snapped over.
Jimmy, I think it'll get to the point to where you're going to actually see one of these creatures. And if you want them to back off and kind of go away, like I said, I would light that place up like a football stadium. And I think you'll find your chicken coop will be left alone. You'll probably see a lot of the activity die down. But again, I think it's just a matter of time before you run into one, more than just the red eyes.
Part of me wants to see it. Then the other part of me doesn't want to see it. I think going in, you want to have an actual encounter. Then when something like that happens, you don't really want to see it.
Yeah, I always say, if you're a researcher and you're going to an area and you're having activity, you have the option to leave. But when it's on your property, you don't have the option to leave. What do you think Sasquatch is?
I don't believe it's an ape or an undiscovered relic, hominid, like some people believe. I mean, it's too many weird things going on with it that you just can't explain, like not getting it on camera. I've dug into the actual Nephilim point of view, and I'm not 100% on it. I just know there's something almost supernatural abilities they have. I mean, it's hard to explain.
Yeah, I've actually looked into that theory as well. And I get why people go that route, kind of look into that as a possible answer. My best advice to you would be to just light that place up. And I think you'll see them back off the chicken coop. I think you'll see activity kind of die down.
Now, going back to my neighbor, they had actual chicken coop duck pen next door to me. And his actual chickens and ducks were vanishing one by one. But the difference between where he had his and I have mine, his was by the woods right there, and it wasn't well lit area where it was at. So, and he would tell me, he said, I can't find no remains or nothing. He said, they're just disappearing, and all this chicken and ducks vanished. And usually with predation, you will find feathers, parts of the chicken or duck. And this was just like they just got taken.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I would imagine with chickens, you have like a coyote come in or something, there would be a mess. But the fact that they're being snatched one by one, very concerning. You know, keep documenting and keep me up to date as far as what's going on. You have my cell phone. If I have the answers, I'll give them to you. If you want advice, I'll give you advice. I don't know if it'd be great advice, but it'll be Wes advice. But I really appreciate you taking the time to come on and share what happened to you. And again, keep me up to date.
Okay, thank you for having me.